Hello and welcome to today's edition of Your Questions Answered with Father Gruner. I'm John Veneri. This is the program where you send us the questions. Father Gruner answers them. We talk about them. We're getting a lot of good questions, so please continue to send them. Send them to questions@thefatimacenter.com. Here we have one that's kind of multi-layered, so we might have to do more than one program to answer this. We'll see how it goes, because there's a lot to talk about here. This person says, we have a very confusing situation at this time with a Pope Emeritus, still seen at public events in the Vatican. He's talking about Benedict XVI, who resigned, or however you want to put it, as well as the reigning pontiff, Pope Francis. When I see this situation, I'm reminded of Sister Lucy's statement about seeing a bishop in white, which seems to be on the surface to point to some confusion as to whether or not this bishop was in fact the Pope. Can you comment on the fact that we now see two bishops in white in Rome at this time, and do you believe there is anything in the undisclosed third secret that relates to this unprecedented situation?
Well,
can you answer that in 2 minutes, Father?
I don't know. First of all, I think the first thing is that I don't know this person is what he knows or what he doesn't know, so I have to review some recent history. There's several journalists talking about this question, and first of all, I have to agree with the questioner is that there has never been, in the history of the Church, from the year 33 AD, from the time Peter was the first Pope, until 2013, there has never been two popes in the Church at one time. Yeah. There have been resignations, but never two popes.
Well, we never had the Pope who resigned remaining in Rome and wearing white.
And calling himself Pope Emeritus.
Pope Emeritus, yeah, this is completely unprecedented.
And having his papal coat of arms, but the symbolism is there. He still has his papal coat of arms. Mm-hmm. So let's first of all go back and say, okay, well, what has happened in the past? Well, we've had the resignation of Pope Celestine V, and that was Peter Celestine. He had been, before he was Pope, he had been a hermit. And when he resigned the papacy, he went back to being a hermit. Mm-hmm. So, hermit before, Pope, hermit afterwards. Of course, he wasn't even a bishop when he was made Pope, when he was elected Pope. So the first thing he had to do was to consecrate him a bishop. Mm-hmm. And as such, since the office of bishop, since it's a sacrament, it left a mark on his soul. That, of course, between him and God doesn't change. But
as far as externals
is concerned, he went to live in the Vatican, or lived actually at St. John Lateran, where the papal apartments were then, and ruled the church from there. When he left the papal apartments, left the papal soil, went back to his old hermitage up on some mountain somewhere, and he put back his old vestments on as a hermit would wear. And that's what happened to him, and he died a few years later. Now, that's Pope Celestine. And he resigned somewhere between.
And he's a canonized saint.
He's a canonized saint. It's 1294, 1296, in that range. If you're looking for him in history, I should have these details, but it's in that range. Mm-hmm. And he was succeeded by Pope Boniface VIII. Now, the next Pope, there's another one I just turned off just recently, but we'll go to the next famous resignation, and the latest resignation before Benedict's was in 1415. At that time, there were three men claiming to be the Pope, but each of them, of course, didn't say, those other two are also popes, and I'm also Pope. No, they said, I'm the true Pope, and those two other guys, they're not the true Pope at all.
Right.
So there was this, it was known as the Great Western Schism, if you're looking up in history books or encyclopedias, and it went from the time of 1379 to 1415. At the beginning, there were only two men claiming to be the Pope, and then around 1409, a third man got into the act and claimed he was the Pope, and the other two were not. So, but when, to bring this to resolution, two of the three popes, the other third one was never considered seriously, but two of the three popes both resigned, and both became what they were before. Mm-hmm. And so one became a cardinal, he was a cardinal before, and he was commissioned by the new pope to be cardinal of the Marche region, and that's what he did. Mm-hmm. And he was sent out as legate, but he never claimed to be pope. He didn't wear the white vestments again. He didn't keep his papal coat of arms. Yep. He was not addressed as Pope Emeritus such and such. No, he was simply Cardinal so-and-so. Like the other cardinals, I mean, he was just with his last name, that's all. And so I forgot what happened to the other one, but neither one of them ever wore the garments of a pope again, and they resumed their office that they had before. It's as simple as that. So what I'm trying to get at is that this situation is entirely unique in the whole history of the church.
Yeah, it seems this idea of this, just even the notion of having a pope in Rome and also a pope emeritus, seems to be contrary to the entire nature of the papacy itself.
Well, now that it's getting more. This, of course, this has raised questions, and of course, most of us, including myself, we get busy with other things, and so, well, it's an interesting question, and thank you very much, and keep on with our business. But there's some journalists in Rome who have not let this question rest. And now, one of them is known as Mr. Antonio Socci, who wrote about the third secret. He was the one who was commissioned to write, basically to prove that the Fatima Center was wrong about the third secret. And after reading our material, he said, I had to surrender to the evidence. Mm-hmm. There is another text, okay. Besides that, of course, he had the witness of Archbishop Capobillo, who's now become cardinal. In any case, it was Socci who said, well, something's going wrong here. What's going on? So he wrote a series of articles in February this year, 2014, and didn't come to a conclusion, but just recently, something new has happened. And it's just in the last 2 weeks, and that is that the Dean of the Vaticanistas, Vittorio Missuri, he's the one, I'm sure you know, John, he wrote the book, he did the questions of John Paul II, Crossing the Threshold of Hope.
Yes.
He apparently told a priest, I was just told this recently on the weekend, that he told a priest, I might have to spend a long time in purgatory for doing that book because I tried to tell John Paul that you can't say it this way.
There's actual errors.
Yeah,
yes, I was there for that. And the Pope
pounded
his fist. And
said, no, it's exactly this way. Yeah. So, but he's obviously not convinced.
Yeah.
And he can spend time in purgatory for having part of publishing this thing, which had these. But the point is, he is the one that the Pope chose to be the interviewer to make the book Crossing the Threshold of Hope, and he's the same man who interviewed Cardinal Ratzinger,
yes.
Cardinal Ratzinger, in 1984, and talked about the third secret being concerning the dangers threatening the faith and life of the Christian and therefore the world. That, of course, has not been shown in the new text that they've given us. But my point being, he's that highly placed that this man has a reputation on his own. So he's now going into the question. And as Socci says, when he's into the question, it means that people high up who are unnamed inside the Vatican are also into this question.
Yes.
And the question that they don't ask basically, who is the true Pope, is the question. Now, why do they raise this question? Well, very simply, it's been now explained by Missuri that there's a new book out by a canonist. And this canonist talks about Pope Benedict has, these are distinctions that he's been trying to say, but finally this canonist and Missuri are making it very clear. Pope Benedict has resigned the Ministerium, that's the Latin word for ministry. He's resigned the Ministerium, or the ministry of the papacy, but he has not resigned from the munus, that's a Latin word for meaning office. So he's resigned, Missuri is not saying this of himself, he's saying, this is what we are being told by Benedict and the people around him, and that he has now made a distinction between the papacy has a munus, has the office of the munus of the Pope, papacy, and the munus has a ministry. Now he's resigned from the ministry, but he's not resigned from the munus. Now this distinction, I can tell you, is completely false.
Sure it is,
Yeah.
yes.
It doesn't exist. However, so if he
It's
thinks...
like a father resigning from the family, and just saying, well, I'm no longer in charge, but I'm still your dad. I no longer have authority over you.
Yeah.
And the father has the God-given authority. He can't surrender.
Yes, that's what I mean. By the very nature of being the father, by the very nature, the father brought with his wife the children into the world.
Yeah.
No one else is there. I mean, God is their father, and their priest could be their spiritual father, but their physical father is only one man, and that man cannot say, I'm no longer their father. He may say what he wants, but he doesn't change.
I mean, as we said, the papacy, a person can resign from the papacy, but you walk away from the whole thing. You don't have, half and half.
Well, in fact, the fact that there's 265 or maybe 266 popes in the whole history of the papacy, I've only heard of 3 times of a resignation. I've given you 2 of them. And if there's some more, I don't know. But I can go to the third one. But the point I'm getting at is that it's only happened. So if you're talking percentage-wise, it's less than 1%. It's less than 0.5%, actually. It's almost less than 1/3%. My point getting at is that it's not a regular thing. And secondly, all the other popes who resigned did not distinguish between the munus and the ministerium. They gave up the papacy, that is the office. They gave up the ministry. They didn't give up, I'm just giving you the ministry, but not the office. That distinction has never been made. And so the question is being seriously asked in high places. Well, now, if he didn't resign the munus, if he didn't resign the office, then he didn't resign. And if he didn't resign, then he's still the Pope. And that, of course, is not being answered. So you're watching this on this thing. This is not, for the English-speaking audiences, almost nobody is hearing this.
Yeah.
But it's being certainly asked questions in the Italian press and higher than the Italian press.
Yes, and you know, there might be people watching this who are saying, well, you know, you two are crazy talking like this. We have to keep in mind, this problem is not of our making.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it's not of our making that we have this unprecedented, this person writing in sees that this is unprecedented, 2 popes, one calling himself Emeritus, and the question is to the average person, what's going on?
Yeah.
Now in Rome you have the Socis and the Missouris and the Canons who are trying to really get to the nuts and bolts.
You see, certainly part of the problem I think is for people is that, I mean, just like, I can drive a car. I've been driving a car for 50 years, and even more. But I don't know how the car works. So I know I put gas in the engine, and I know I put my foot on the gas and I know that much about it. But I really don't know what the carburetor does and what the air filter does. I mean, I maybe configure that, but I really don't know how it works. So when I need something fixed, I go to my mechanic and say, this thing doesn't work, I need this fixed. He says, oh, well, it's such and such, and it's going to cost you $20 or $200. So, and I say, well, if I think he's not telling me the truth, I go to another mechanic and find out he's telling me the same thing or not. But my point is, I don't understand the internal workings of it. I know it, but it's not working, so I do know. Mm-hmm. So the same thing with something like this. We don't expect people to be theologians to understand this thing, but theologians have to grapple with these questions. They can't just say, oh, well, that's what they say and don't worry about it. No, there has to be a fundamental truth behind all this. And so if a pope resigns the munus, the ministry, but not the munus, not the office, then I have to say, I'm going to take bets, 1,000 to 1. If you didn't resign the munus, then you didn't resign. However, let's just make it, so the second question comes up is this, and I was talking to a bishop, I'd rather not mention his name, but I was talking to a bishop who said, well, there's certainly questions about this resignation. Mm-hmm. And these questions were quite public, because when I was in Rome, just before he resigned, I was there last year. I was actually doing some television shows over there in our TV station there, and I was told that they cannot. They have, if you're in St. Peter's Square, you're in not far from St. Peter's Square is the Vatican Museum, and you have these lineup of people going to this, but they're losing $10,000 a day. How did that happen? Because the bankers, the Visa card, the MasterCard, the other people that have the bank, none of them would accept the Vatican's. So if you want to pay the Vatican $10 for a ticket with your Visa card, they couldn't take it because the Visa card wouldn't work for them, because Visa said, we're not letting you do that anymore. So as a result, they were losing I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of dollars all at once. As soon as Francis is elected, the very day he's elected, Visa said you're going to get your Visa, MasterCard, all these. So
yeah, so
there's some pressure.
There's something going on, and it appears to be pressure. The problem is we're out of time, but let's pick this up on the next program.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Next time.